Hey, what's going on YouTube? This is Devin with Jurassic Magic, and in today's video, I wanted to go over a Final Fantasy commander named Lightning Army of One. And I gotta say, overall, the art looks pretty sweet. I love the sword, and obviously the art does exemplify what the character is doing. It's going into that aggressive theme, wanting to deal a bunch of combat damage. But before I do go any further, I do have a Discord link down below in the description if you want to join a great community, and if you want to support the channel a little bit further, consider joining my Patreon, as there's a lot of great benefits, such as early access to videos, deck advice, and much more. And lastly, I do have a TCG player affiliate link if you are shopping for any of these singles that I talk about. If you plan on building Lightning yourself and you want some of these to pick up, all you have to do is click on it, shop for the singles you want, and that's really it. There's no extra. Alright, so now with that out of the way, let's get back to Lightning and let's discuss how to brew around her. So let's first discuss Lightning Army of One and what she does. For one red and a white, it's a legendary creature, human soldier with first strike, trample, and lifelink. And it has the ability Stagger. Whenever Lightning deals combat damage to a player until your next turn, if a source would deal damage to that player or permanent that player controls, it deals double that damage instead. So in a weird way, this kind of reminds me of Nariv, Heart of the Storm, in the aspect of having some sort of stipulation to double damage. Lightning has to get in for some combat damage. Nariv, when creatures enter that turn, they double the damage. Obviously they're similar in that aspect, but Lightning is a little different. I think it's a little easier, in my opinion, to double damage. And there's one important key word that I like to highlight, and that's first strike. That's the most important word that makes the doubling damage work, because Lightning will deal damage first, and if you're swinging in with any other creatures or dealing damage with any other source, those follow up by dealing double damage. Lightning won't necessarily deal double damage herself unless you go into like extra combats or even double strike, but she's a great enabler to at least get one double damage trigger. And just to give you a brief overview of this video and what I want to accomplish of helping you, is I'll first talk about the basics, ramp, and card draw, because I feel like if you're going to make this type of deck, you need a lot of that, because Lightning acts more as a win con, doubling the damage of your creatures. You want to essentially get a lot of card advantage pieces along with ramp. Then following that, I'll talk about some of the best creatures that you could utilize, or even really any source, so that way you could just double damage after Lightning. And then following that, I will go into some win cons, talking about even amplifying the damage by getting extra combats. Alright, so now with that said, let's get it started first with talking about the basics. It doesn't matter what kind of deck you are, you absolutely need the basics of card draw and ramp. Let's first discuss ramp, because you want to make sure you can get your stuff out, because this is more of an aggressive strategy. I do like Sword of the Animist and Sword of Hearth and Home. Our commander is pretty cheap, where we could get these out early on, equip it to our commander, search our libraries for lands, and put them on the battlefield. Sword of Hearth and Home is a little better in the aspect of also blanking another creature that could be pretty viable in some situations. You can also go for something like Reaver Cleaver. This is another equipment that works pretty well, especially with our commander. Buffs her up a little bit. Whenever this creature deals combat damage to a player or planeswalker, create that many treasure tokens. But I will say this is not just a typical Boros equipment deck. I just wanted to highlight those quickly, because Boros doesn't really have too many ramp options outside of just artifact ramp. Of course, you could go into those, and I'm not going to dive into those too much, because a lot of people do know basic artifact ramp, like the talisman, signets, etc. Another option as far as ramp goes, and really even card draw, is Professional Facebreaker. Whenever one or more creatures you control deal combat damage to a player, you create a treasure token. You could also sacrifice a creature, exile the top card of your library. You may play that card this turn. This is pretty useful in the fact where if you swing at 3 different opponents, you'll gain 3 treasure tokens. And if you're swinging with your commander, technically it does have first strike, so it'll hit first before the other creature. So technically you would get 4 treasure tokens, or more depending on if you have more first strikers. But I would say the best ramp option in Boros color combination, if you do have the resources for it, is Smothering Tide. This is a game changer, but can be quite powerful, getting you an insane amount of treasure tokens. That way you could utilize them either towards your commander, recasting it, because most likely somebody might remove it before combat, or casting your other spells. So obviously there's some good ramp pieces. Also, there are some great card draw options. Boros has been getting a lot of support recently as far as card draw goes. One clear example of that is Esper Sentinel. This is just a great card overall. A lot of people are casting a lot of non-creature spells, so it's very easy to get a couple cards cards, even per turn rotation. I also like Battle Angels of Tyr because this is an aggressive build. We want to be dealing a lot of combat damage, and when Battle Angels of Tyr do, we potentially can get card draw, treasure tokens, and gain life depending on if one of our opponents we attack with have more cards in their hand, or more lands, or more life. I also think this is pretty powerful in the deck because if we swing in with our commander, we will double the damage, and so each of those Battle Angels, instead of 4 damage, will deal 8 damage total and get that value too. Another great card draw resource that is kind of underrated is Firemane Commando. I haven't seen a whole lot of people play this, but I think it's very good. Whenever you attack with 2 or more creatures, draw a card, but it does have the downside whenever another player attacks with 2 or more creatures, they draw a card if none of those creatures attack you. But that can be an upside because we are an aggressive build. Some people might want to retaliate, but also they might want to have card draw, so they might swing towards other opponents, so it's just a little bit of incentive, all the while we might get some benefit out of that. Another similar card to that would be Aurelia the Law Above. This is another excellent card in my opinion. Whenever a player attacks with 3 or more creatures, you draw a card, and whenever a player attacks with 5 or more creatures, Aurelia the Law Above deals 3 damage to each of your opponents, and you gain 3 life, so this is a great way of getting card draw, dealing a little bit of damage, and gaining life depending on the situation. Of course, it does have Flying Vigilance and Haste, so we could swing right away, and again with our commander, we could swing with this, and it deals double the damage because of the first strike. And of course, if you do want to move up a bracket, the One Ring is an incredible card, great for card draw, and especially because we're gaining life, we're really just negating a lot of the bird encounters. Also, it can protect us in situations where somebody has a big giant board, and we gain protection from everything until our next turn, so that is pretty notable too. So now that I've talked about ramp and card draw, I wanted to move over to some creatures that we could utilize in the deck. So when I first saw this commander, my mind immediately went to Gisela, Blade of Gold Knight, because it's essentially doing the same kind of thing, doubling the damage to our opponents, but also it's gonna negate half the damage we take from our opponents too. And what's very cool about this one specifically is the fact that if any source, including your opponent swinging at other players, they will deal double damage to them too. So I like this because we could just double the damage of our commander when we're swinging, and amplify the damage even further with other creatures we swing with. Another card to consider, but I would be kind of wary about this one, is Odric, Lunarch Marshal. I like this because it basically gives creatures abilities of other creatures you control. So just based off of our commander, it does have First Strike, Lifelink, and Trample, and it will give all our other creatures those abilities, and maybe even some more depending on what other abilities other creatures do have. But this does negate the double damage, I will say that, because all our creatures will have First Strike, so obviously that can be a big downside, but I wanted to mention it as far as an option goes because Lifelink is pretty good, and First Strike is pretty powerful too, even if we don't double the damage. If somebody blocks one of our creatures and they have the same toughness and power as our creature will beat that one because that's First Strike. So that's just something to note. Speaking of striking, Blade Historian is one incredible card. Attacking creatures you control have double strike, and this is the neat part about our commander that I like to highlight. The next time you would deal damage, you will double it. So for example, if you swing in with our commander with double strike, the first strike damage will hit for 3 damage, and then the next one will deal 6 damage. And sure, all our other creatures will have double strike too, but that's completely okay because we swing in with all of them anyways, and then on that second strike damage they will be doubled. And that's why I do believe Embercleave is also very fitting in this type of deck. If we give our commander double strike, we could amplify the damage even more. The next card, even though it doesn't necessarily synergize with our game plan, it kind of does in a way. Resplendent Angel can be pretty powerful in this type of deck. It is only 3 mana for a flying creature. At the beginning of each end step, if you gain 5 or more life this turn, create a 4/4 white angel creature token with flying and vigilance. That is pretty powerful in its own right because our commander will gain 3 life when it swings in, and other life depending on other creatures. This does also have a pump effect until on a turn Resplendent Angel gets +2/+2 and gains lifelink. That could be pretty huge because they'll just swing in for 5 damage, and then we'll just make a 4/4 angel creature token. And because we are gaining life on that first strike damage, let's include another angel like Archangel of Thune. I know I'm including a lot of angels, but they work really well with the combat strategy. Whenever you gain life, you put a +1/+1 counter on each creature you control. So because we are swinging in that turn, getting first strike damage, all our creatures will get a buff because of Archangel of Thune, and then they get to essentially double that damage, including the +1/+1 counter that they did gain. And I already know I mentioned one damage doubler, but we could include a ton of other damage doublers like Twin Flame Tyrant, Gratuitous Violence, or even some damage triplers like City on Fire or Fiery Emancipation. I just like this idea because our commander is a damage doubler. Why not do some more math and triple, quadruple, and even go further beyond that? But in all honesty, I think extra combats might be the way to go. Probably the one that would definitely win you the most games, because your commander does have the ability whenever it deals combat damage to a player until your next turn. If a source would deal damage to that player or permanent or that player controls, it deals double that damage instead. So that does include extra combats. For example, if you swing it with lightning for the first combat, creatures will double their damage. But if you go into that extra combat, you swing it with lightning again, you will then triple damage following that. And the more combats you get, the more you're essentially going to double. So a classic I would like to highlight is Aurelia the War Leader. Whenever it attacks for the first time each turn, untap all creatures you control. After this phase, there's an additional combat phase. There is also some other ones like Relentless Assault, Seize the Day, or even at World at War. Getting those additional combat phases mean that we're going to be doubling more damage. I also like the Great Train Heist and also Response and Resurgence because they act as additional benefits. With Great Train Heist, we do get the extra combat, but we also can buff up our creatures, giving them first strike and also gaining some treasure if we pay into that spree cost. I also like Response and Resurgence because it acts as removal along with getting an extra combat, giving our creatures vigilance and first strike. I would say out of all the instant and sorcery spells, Savage Beating is by far the best extra combat spell that we could utilize because we could entwine it to give creatures double strike. Again, we want to swing in with double strike with our commander and getting an extra combat. Think of it this way: if our commander swings in with double strike and an extra combat, each first and second strike damage will amplify the damage, and then when we go into the extra combat, we could amplify it even further. It seems pretty ridiculous how powerful Savage Beating can be with this commander. So those are great one-time effects, but you want to have an effect that could get you multiple extra combats. So that's why I believe Aggravated Assault can help you get there and potentially get you infinite combats if you have like Reaver Cleaver attached to your commander. Of course, if you're trying to start the loop of infinite combats, you will need to have 5 treasure or more, so that way you could pay into Aggravated Assault's activated ability. And since Reaver Cleaver and your commander will have a power and toughness 4/3, you'll just need to have 1 mana that you could activate Aggravated Assault with the 4 other treasure. And then following that, your commander will double the damage, gaining you 8 treasure, and then you'll double again, getting 16 treasure, then 32, so on and so forth, because again, after each combat, you're essentially doubling, tripling, and so on and so forth. So if you haven't watched this channel before, you may know that I absolutely love extra combats. I'm a little biased towards them, but I think they're pretty viable, especially with this commander, because we are incentivized to keep doubling with her ability. However, that is going to do it for me, guys. Thank you guys so much for coming by and watching this video on Lightning Army of One. And it is truly an army of one because you could swing in for a ton of damage. This is at the front line, swinging with that first strike, so that way your other creatures can deal double damage. Or even if you get into those extra combats or even double strike, you could just seriously amplify the damage even further. Lightning is quite scary, and having lifelink means that you're going to gain a ton of life along the process. But let me know down below in the comments, what do you think of Lightning? Do you plan on building it yourself? What other strategies would you follow building around this commander? Also, make sure to like, share, and subscribe to the channel. And with that out of the way, thank you for stopping by.